Very much. That was a good summary, better than I could have done. All right, so today I want to talk to you a bit about market research and user research, how they currently work together, and how I think they could work better together, hopefully in the future, using some tips that I provide to you. So full disclosure, as was mentioned, I work at a digital agency, so my experience is very much from the digital side of things, particularly in user research. So what I talk about today is going to be about website research, and that can be applied more to email marketing and advertising as well. A little bit can be used for actual tangible product user research, although that's its own specialty, so I'll sort of stay away from that realm for today. So the first thing that we do when we get a new client is to sit down with them and have a discussion about user research. And quite often we get a lot of pushback from them. Oh, we already know our audience. Oh, we don't need that. We've done it in-house, that sort of thing. And the reason that that comes up a lot is because there's a confusion between user research and market research. And so what they're talking about most often is they know their audience. They've done the market research. But what they haven't done is the user research, and that's what we're trying to push for them. And it's not a surprise that there's some confusion between the two. We have very similar methodology. It's just that the slight focus is different, the nuances are different, and so you can't blame clients for misunderstanding that they are two different things. Another thing that user researchers have done over the years is we've sort of stolen more traditional terminology that is known in market research, and we've changed the definition and then call it our own, and so it's no surprise that people are confused by that as well. So one example is personas. You know, in market research, it's all about who your audience is, the demographics for them, and that sort of thing. When it comes to user research, we're not so interested in the demographics unless it influences the behavior of people on a website. So, for example, if you're marketing to millennials and you want to do an advertising campaign to them and you've got a website for them and you might do some email marketing, the subject line for millennials may include emojis because that might prompt them to open the email more than plain text. That is true, so there's a little tip for you. But that is where we would use the demographic details to influence some of our designs. So at the moment, market research and user research, I feel like we're a little bit separate. You've got two groups of people who work on their own, and we don't really communicate that well. What we should be doing, though, is talking to each other, whether that's internally, if you've got a market research team and a web communication team internally, or if you've got two agencies who are working on behalf of a company. They really do need to communicate with each other to get the best marketing for that particular client or business. So I know most of you are market researchers, so I don't want to dwell too much on details of market research, but I just want to give you a little bit of an overview for comparison's sake. So with market research, it's very much about looking at a situation, sort of being a neutral observer and getting the lay of the land. And so I sort of use this image of a hot air balloon because I think it's appropriate. You're sort of observing and finding out what's happening. Your objective and what your focus is on is finding out who your customers are and their interests, what your competition's doing, that sort of thing. And all of this then drives business decisions. So what you're trying to do in the end is to reduce the risk involved in releasing a new product or a new service or going into a new market, that sort of thing. So it's all very important for those major decisions. And it's also about influencing future marketing campaigns and messaging and that sort of thing. So we move on to user research. How does it compare? Well, we are not in that sort of hot air balloon looking down. We are down in the trenches tinkering with things and trying to see if we change one thing, is it going to have an impact on how our sales do? And so our focus is really about getting a desired outcome. So it's not, you know, is there a new product we can release, but rather how do we tweak a button on a website to sell that product more? We're trying to address the needs of the users. So for an example is websites, and making tasks easier for them so that they aren't struggling and getting lost in our sort of digital universe that we've created. And what we really want to find out is, are there any triggers? What works? What makes someone click that button? What makes someone make that purchase? And are there any blockers? So is the site too complicated? Is there a way we can streamline the process and that sort of thing? And the outcome is that we get more conversions. So we've already got the product information. Market research has told us release this product, and now we're trying to get more sales online for it. And that gives the business a better boost in sales or clients, and the users of that website are happier because it's easier to use. So I want to go through a few more detailed differences between the two. Please take these with a pinch of salt. I know that quite often a piece of research may straddle the line between the two, so these are pretty general in their descriptions. So the first is market research focuses on the wants, where user research focuses on the needs. So for example, if you are a market researcher for a men's clothing line, you may go out and do some research and find out that there is a big demand for a new type of coat. It goes down to the knee, it has a hood. Maybe you find out there's some new colors that people want and that sort of thing. So there we go, we've launched this new product. Now, where user research comes in is we put it on the website, we want to sell it. What we want to find out is how many images do you need of that coat to really sell that product? What angle of images do you need? What text needs to be on that button? So we want to find out what people need in order to make that purchase. So one of the ways you can do that on your own website is to use the principle of the 5 whys, and you may use that already in your research. The idea is that you ask somebody why they want something. So a new product, let's follow along with that coat example. Why do you want a new coat? Well, my old coat is getting old, it's got some holes in it. Why does it have holes in it? Well, I've worn it for the last 4 years, and so it's just a little bit old. Why have you worn it for 4 years? Well, it's really warm, it feels good, I'm comfortable in it, and off you go. So you constantly are asking them why for 5 steps. And what that does is it lets you figure out the heart of the problem, why they need your product or service. If you can use that to guide the content that you write on your website or your emails, that will answer the question for them before they even need to think about it. They've got all that information there because you did the research to get there. Another way that you can answer people's needs is by thinking of one purpose per page on a website. And I know it's difficult because you want to signpost to all sorts of places on your website when you've got so much to give to people, you want them to see it all. What you want to really focus on is that funnel. What do you want people to do next? What do they need in order to take that next step to get in touch, to make a purchase, whatever it is? So focusing on that one purpose per page, so one button on the page, one form on the page, that sort of thing, will help to guide the user and make it just that one bit easier for them to get what they need faster. So another difference between market research and user research is that market research will focus on general direction. It'll say, we think we should go in this direction. Whereas user research focuses on detail. So it's very much, like I mentioned, buttons, content, that sort of thing. So for example, buttons have been a heavily researched topic in user research. But unfortunately, there is no easy answer. Buttons succeed for different websites because you've got different audiences, you've got different messages, different calls to action. And so I can't come to you and say a red button with 3 words that has a little bit of rounded corners will be the thing you need. So things like colors, wording, arrows, shapes, everything needs to be tested in order to make sure even a button is getting the best optimization it can have. And something like get your free sample versus get my free sample will have different click-through rates. So it's really just the details of it all that make a difference. So the big question is then, how do you know what to test? Because there's a lot of stuff on a website, there's a lot of stuff on an email. Where do you start? You start by getting to know what your current web traffic is doing. So one of the most underutilized tools, I think, on Google Analytics is the on-page analytics. And this is actually accessed through an extension on Chrome. And what you do is you put that on your Chrome, and then you can log into analytics and then go to your actual website, and you'll see, I don't know how clear it is, but you'll see little these orange bubbles that sort of pop up near all the links. And that tells you the percentage of people who come to that page that click on that link. So immediately you know, oh gosh, the Our Work button, for example, I think that's underperforming. Let's run some tests on that and see how we can improve it. So that's a free and very useful tool, and it's one that I think people don't really use that much. Another really useful tool is, and there's a lot of platforms out there for heat maps and scroll maps. And this is a great way to get to know your audience as well. So for heat maps, this gives you a sense, again, of where people are clicking on your site. But what this does that on-page analytics doesn't do is it will give you clicks that aren't on links. So for example, and I've blurred out the client here, but you can see these blue dots within the text. They aren't actually on links. They're just on the text itself. So we're able to pick up if people are clicking content that they think should be a link, but that isn't a link. And so we either need to change how that visually looks or put a link on it so that people can get more information about that particular thing. So in this example, we could see that the 2 navigation items there were really a hot spot for users, and we were able to signpost to them more from other areas on the site. The scroll map's also useful. The colors indicate how many people have been scrolling to that particular area. And with this client, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually a form down here at the bottom. And then green and blue colors indicate that people aren't even scrolling down to see that form. So that gave us the reasoning to go in and first test the form to make sure the form was enticing, but then also test the content on the page to find out why people weren't even getting down to the bottom of that page. Okay, so another difference is that market research is very in-depth. It's traditional, you want a lot of insight. And user research, with my Inspector Gadget there, is focused on particular tasks. So there's a couple of ways that you can actually work through task testing with users. The first is called click path testing. And in this, you sit down with some users on an individual basis, and you speak to them about what they would need to do in order to complete a specific task on your site. So you may start them off on the home page, you could start them off on a different page, but essentially you're observing their journey. What are they doing? What clicks are they taking to get to that final goal? Let's say you said you want them to fill out a contact form. So you just watch them and you ask them to talk out loud, and then you just sort of see where the pain points are, where are they struggling, are they looping around a couple of times before they find the right path to get to that form. You can also do something called first click testing, which essentially says, okay, I want you to complete this task, but I just want you to tell me where you would click first. And what this helps you to determine is where they think in your site architecture that particular functionality should live. So you're not watching the whole process, but you're just getting a general idea of where that form should be in your navigation. Another way you can test this is through journey mapping, and this is really great because it allows you to look beyond one platform. So instead of just focusing on a website, you're focusing on your entire digital universe. So what you would do in this instance is you would ask users to come in, and this can be a sort of a focus group setting, and you ask them to walk you through the process of when they're first interested in a particular activity. Let's say you want them to register on your site as a user, and you ask them to walk you through the steps that it took to do so. So for example, if they come to your site, they may register, and then they'll get an email that's confirming their registration. And after that, they can click the link in the email that then takes them to the site where they log in, and then they can fill in all their profile information, and then so on and so forth. Throughout this process, you'll also be able to find areas that are weak or frustrating for users, and so you're able to fix those. One example I have is a few months ago we did this for an organization in Chicago that does tours in the city. And so we brought in some of their tour guides to discuss the process of registering as a tour guide, of scheduling the tours, and so on. And what we found out was that there was a lot of email communication in the process, some of which was automated, some of which was manual. And sometimes the manual emails conflicted with the automated emails. So what it led to was a lot of confusion in the part of the tour guides. So this was a really useful task for that, because if we had just been looking at the website, we wouldn't have known that the emails were a problem. Now, I've talked to you a lot about user testing, and you've got to get users in there, and that's a very difficult thing to do, and that's what puts a lot of our clients off. But the good thing is that it doesn't take a whole lot of work to get usability information. It's a very quick turnaround. So Jacob Nielsen says that you only need 5 users in order to figure out 85% of the usability problems. So if you can get 5 people in a room who can give you feedback on your website, then you're pretty much going to figure out all the problems on that site. So that sort of brings us to the idea that market research really is more of a statistical significance. You guys are talking to a lot more than 5 people to get the information you need, whereas we're looking for more common trends, because we can test to see if a button isn't going to work or if it is going to work, and it's that quick turnover. So an example of an exercise you can do to find those common trends is called card sorting. And in this, you take a bunch of different types of content, put them literally on cards, index cards, and give them to a user. So they've got a deck of cards. And then say, okay, if you were on this page of our website, let's say it's a service page, what types of content would you want to see on that page? And the user is going to sift through, and they're going to pick some of these pieces of content, and they're going to lay them out. And then you just ask, what priority order? Put them, priority number 1 at the top, moving down. And that will give you a good sense, after you've got 5 or 7 users to do this, it'll give you a good sense of what content needs to be on that page, what people want to see, and actually what content doesn't need to be on that page. So we recently did this for a client who had done a bunch of market research and saw that their competitors had videos. Videos were the big thing. We've got to have videos on the site. So we did some card sorting and found out nobody cared about videos. That wasn't an issue. So instead of spending thousands of dollars on video, they just left them off. They don't need to do it. Another thing is that market research is very infrequent, whereas user research is very frequent. So we're doing this constantly. If we create a button, we want to test it. Then if we find out what the results of the test are, and then we test it again. So it's a very frequent thing. And the nice thing is it's a quick turnover. So it can be cheap and dirty, and off we go. So one example of this is A/B testing. You can do A/B testing not just for a website, you can do it for advertising, you can do it for email campaigns, but the idea is that you have two versions of a page with a very slight difference, and you test to see which one gets you the best conversion. So what your website will do is it will randomly show one version to different users, and we'll just see what the conversion rate is for them. So in this example, all I've done is put an arrow on that button versus no arrow on this button. Now, if you want to test more than two options, you can. That's called multivariate testing. So when you're looking at this, many of you are probably deciding which button you prefer. Something draws you to a certain text than the other. And so that's what we're trying to figure out, which button text will get that click through. And once we're done with the button text, we'll look at the button color, and on we go till we get a button that really converts at the most optimal rate it can get. And the final thing is that user research is done throughout the process. It's about testing before, during, and after a project, whereas market research tends to be done at the beginning because it is expensive, because it is time-consuming, and because so many business decisions are made from it. So if you don't take anything else from this presentation, I would recommend taking this, which is that user research should always be integrated into your strategy. So we've had a couple of speakers talking about strategy, and user research should be part of it. So include that in your timeline, include different stages and types of user research along the way, because the whole point is that once you've built something, you test it and you learn from that, and then the cycle begins over again. So it is never ending, but that's part of the excitement and the fun. But you're constantly making those inroads to better optimized websites and other platforms. So I think I'm out of time now. Great. I know that was a lot to throw at you. Yes?
Is there a free resource for the heat maps?
The heat maps, I don't know of a free resource, but that's because I just haven't Googled them.
Okay.
You may be able to find one. Quite often that sort of data is a paid-for platform, but there are a lot out there. And I can give you some names after.
For the A/B testing and the multivariate, what kind of numbers do you need to see? Because my website doesn't get a lot of traction like a company that's selling widgets.
Yeah. So you're right, there does need to be some statistical significance in A/B testing. And the nice thing is the platforms that do it for you, so Google has one called Google Optimize. They will run the test for you until there is a statistical significance. So you don't have to worry about how much traffic your site gets, because Google or whatever platform you use will judge it based on a clear data winner. So if you're only getting 200 visitors per week to your site, it may mean that the test runs longer than a site that has 2,000 visitors per week. But you'll eventually get there. So there isn't a hard and fast number to go by.
The other thing that I'd like to point out is that this builds kind of on what Mark was saying about expanding into new services and markets. Is the user experience portion, the testing, is, as Veronica was saying, it's a constant process. So you're talking about longer term contracts. You're talking about something that you can offer the client that maybe someone else in market research isn't offering the client. So it increases stickiness and of course builds your retainer services.
Yes, good point. and really at the end of the day, user research and market research are not competing. And in fact, we are complementing each other. We need the market research to have a rough foundation of knowledge of who we're trying to market to in our websites. And you want user research to make sure that the information you've provided to a client can be optimized and get them the highest numbers that they can get.
I know you mentioned you were talking about user research in the digital context, but how would you explain the two in a physical good context?
So I think that is its own realm, and to be honest, I am not in the sort of physical goods sector. I would imagine several of these could be used. So for example, you can sit down with someone who has a shoe that you're trying to sell, and you can walk them through, is there a problem lacing up the shoe? Is there, some discomfort when you're putting it on, that sort of thing. But some of the activities I've mentioned, like card sorting, for example, or A/B testing wouldn't be appropriate for those physical products. So sorry, I can't give you more information on that.
Okay. We have time for one more. Maybe another version of that question. So I'm thinking of our marketing to our users. Our users are business to business. They're clients. They don't really buy through our website. They might check our website, but it's all about personal relationships. Is there an analog to this in terms of what's the user experience of, let's say, a brand using our agency as, for a market research service?
Sure. So, we're B2B as well. So I think a lot of it would be based on a conversion of filling in that contact form or picking up that phone and getting in touch. So you would focus on things like your contact form. Are there fields that people are uncomfortable filling out? I know sometimes people ask for company information before the form's been submitted, and maybe people don't want to release that just yet. So I would test the forms and also look at the path that people take to learn about your services. So if you've got a lot of pages on your site that are very long about your services, you may look at the scroll map, for example, and realize people aren't reading that. And actually a paragraph would do, and maybe a video, if video's, something that people are interested in. You may find in a card sort that testimonials are very important. Things like that, bits of content that you didn't expect people would want to see on a service page may actually come to light.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.